Yo, what's going on, boys? Welcome back to episode 6 of the Juicecast. Now, in this episode, we have a bunch to talk about. We have Aljo versus Zalal, UFC alternatives. Is Conor coming back? Will Islam versus Ilia ever happen? There's a lot to touch upon in this episode. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, the first topic that I wanted to touch upon is this weekend's main event, Aljamain Sterling versus Youssef Zalal. Now, the card itself is an Apex card. Obviously, it's not a very good card, but the main event is actually a pretty good fight. This is one of those rare fights that we don't get too frequently between two high-level ranked guys actually fighting each other. This has been something that we've been talking about on a bunch of episodes of the Juicecast, but a lot of these high-level contenders just don't fight each other. They just sit on their spot and wait. So finally, when we're seeing a fight similar to that in this matchup between Zalal and Aljo, it definitely is a breath of fresh air. So in terms of the fight itself, I definitely have to lean with Youssef Zalal. I do think both guys have a path to victory. Aljamain Sterling is a great grappler. He has great wrestling. He has incredible jiu-jitsu. If he's able to get on your back, he's probably going to submit you or at the very least hold you there. So he definitely has paths to victory, but at the end of the day, I think I lean a little bit with Youssef Zalal at this point. I think his striking is definitely better than Aljo's. Aljo's striking is definitely getting better, but it's not at the level of Zalal. Zalal is definitely more dangerous, which is a big factor for one, and for two, I honestly would say he's just more technical as well. He can fight in more ways. He can fight off the back foot. He can fight off the front foot. There's just more he can do. And if he is able to successfully stuff takedowns, I think he's going to have the majority of the success and maybe even land some big shots on the feet and find a finish. But my official prediction for this fight would be a decision victory for Youssef Zalal. I think he's going to do a good job at stuffing takedowns, keeping the fight on the feet, keeping it essentially in his domain, and winning the fight going forward from there. Now, Zalal is also an incredibly high-level grappler, so even if he does get taken down by Aljo, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if he was able to survive and even thrive in those scenarios. But the easiest path to victory for Zalal is stuff takedowns, keep the fight on the feet, pressure effectively, and you're going to win the fight. When you have Aljo essentially off his back foot, there's not much he can really go to, and I think that would essentially be Zalal's domain, more or less. So if he is able to win this fight, it's a huge win for him. Aljamain Sterling is a top 6 or top 7 guy at the bantamweight division. Or sorry, at the featherweight division, I should say. So it's a huge win. Zalal has definitely been a guy that a lot of fans, including myself, are pretty high on, and a win here would definitely catapult him into the top 5 of the weight class and probably be a fight away from a title shot. And who knows, maybe down the line we can eventually see a fight between Jean Silva and Youssef Zalal, or maybe even Avloyev versus Youssef Zalal. There definitely are a lot of matchups that you can put together down the line, assuming Zalal does beat Aljo. But the next topic that I wanted to get into is UFC alternatives. Now, this has been something that I've been thinking about for quite some time, because when you take a look at a lot of the Juicecast episodes, a lot of my videos on Juicy MMA, even the live streams, I do tend to complain a lot about the UFC, and a lot of other fans do as well. And honestly, rightfully so. The company sucks. At this point, it really does. There's a lot of good aspects to the UFC. There's no question about it. And if there was literally nothing good about the company, nobody would watch it. They have a lot of talent. They do a decent job at matchmaking at times. They definitely have great production, I will say that. And they have a monopoly over the MMA space. So there is things that they do effectively, I guess. But at the same time, there's a lot of issues with the company. And that's something that me and a lot of other fans constantly call out. But with all that being said, is there any sort of alternatives that we can go to? Obviously, we complain about the company so much. Could we go somewhere else to actually have our voices be heard, at least a little bit more as compared to what they are at this point? Now, a lot of fans have been talking about alternatives to the UFC for quite a while, and honestly, there's just never really been an example of a legitimate alternative. At this point, I would say the closest thing to a legitimate alternative is probably the PFL or maybe Netflix, which is unproven at this point, but as Netflix didn't have their first MMA card as of yet, I guess the PFL will be the next best thing. But every single time I watch a PFL card, it's horrible. The production sucks. The talent level is not very good. The fights are always incredibly boring. It's just not a real alternative. So the question is, what do we do at this point as MMA fans? Is there anywhere else we can really go? And at this point, honestly, the answer is nowhere. There's nowhere else you can possibly go outside of the UFC, which is unfortunate to say, but It's the reality. We kind of just have to hope that the UFC figures out their stuff and hopefully just gets back on the right path. At a certain point, they were doing great, but at this point, obviously, not the same. The only thing that I could possibly see maybe challenging the UFC, or at the very least giving them a second thought, would be Netflix. I've talked about this on a previous episode of the Juicecast, but essentially, I do think Netflix has a lot of things in place to compete. Not right away, it's not going to be tomorrow, but in the next, let's say, 5 or 10 years, I do think Netflix has some hidden advantages over the UFC that they can really go to. Their platform is huge. There's a lot of folks on their platform, which obviously gives them a huge advantage as compared to any other MMA organization. And for two, their app is legitimately really good. And for three, they also have a ton of money. So there is a possibility that if they have the right management in place, they could do great things. It's just the thing is, we have to be very patient with Netflix. They're not going to turn it around tomorrow. They're not going to be able to sign Ilia Topuria, Islam Makhachev. Excuse me. That was weird. But they're not going to be able to stop. Or they're not going to be able to sign all these super high level talent immediately. It's just not going to happen. But if they play the long game, and if they play the long game smartly, I do think they could have success. And as I said, they do have hidden advantages over the UFC. So that's really the only other organization that it could see even competing. The PFL, although theoretically it is possible, I just don't really have much faith in them at all. When they made their move to initially buy Bellator, I was like, okay, now all of a sudden the roster is a lot better as compared to what it used to be. Maybe they can make the right decisions and head in the right direction. But I don't know how long ago was that already at this point, like a year ago or 2 years ago. And I haven't really seen any sort of improvement at all from the PFL. The cards that they're putting together are just not very good. And it's just unfortunate. And at this point, I know they did change personnel at the top, and maybe things can get a little bit better. But at this point, to be completely honest, I don't have much faith and confidence in the PFL. So it's either the UFC or Netflix. Every other MMA organization is essentially irrelevant. And of course, that does include the PFL. So we'll see how the first card goes for Netflix, and going forward from there, we'll see if they even want to stay in the MMA space. And if they do, we'll see what sort of adjustments and improvements they make as time does progress. But I think they have a shot, to say the very least. But the next topic that I wanted to touch upon is Conor McGregor actually coming back? Now, I know this has been a thought process for a while with MMA fans. Conor, for a while, said he was going to return. Originally, he was supposed to return against Michael Chandler. Then he was supposed to return on the White House card. Now it seems like he's going to return for International Fight Week. The question is he actually going to return? I know Dana White recently said that things went well with Conor McGregor and things are headed in the right direction, which is definitely great news. But is it actually going to happen? Now, in my opinion, if I had to say at this point one way or the other, I think he is going to return for International Fight Week, whether that's for the main event, whether it's for the co-main event, I guess we'll see. But I do think he's going to return. But with that being said, you do need to be cautious whenever talking about Conor McGregor, because you can never fully trust it until you see him walking out for his fight. But before that, you never know what's going to happen. Maybe he's going to pull out. Maybe he's going to want to do something else and all of a sudden not have interest in fighting in the UFC anymore. Maybe contract negotiations are going to go south and maybe he's not going to want to fight because of that. There's a million different things that can go wrong when talking about Conor McGregor. I think it's pretty clear at this point, maybe earlier on in his career, maybe not. But at this point, over the last, let's say, 7 years, he definitely has been a bit inconsistent, we'll put it that way. And it's just very difficult to know if he's actually coming back or not. As I said before, I think the answer is probably yes. I think he probably will return, but you can't be sure until he actually walks out. Now, the other question that a lot of fans wonder is, if he does return, who is he going to fight? Now, in my opinion, I don't think it really makes all that much sense to give him a super high-level guy, like, for example, a Max Holloway or even a Charles Oliveira. I feel as if fights like that are just going to get Conor run over, and if your intention is to bring Conor McGregor back, I think you bring him back in a fight that he can actually win. At this point, he's been out of the game for 5+ years. I don't think he's really going to compete with guys like Max Holloway and especially Charles Oliveira, and I just don't think fights like that really make much sense. So the question is, what fights do make sense? In my opinion, I think you have 3 options. One is Michael Chandler, which unfortunately is not going to happen. Number 2 would be Paddy Pimblett. The reason for why this makes sense is because Paddy is a big name, and also on top of that, He's not very good, if we're being honest. I know he's technically a top 5 guy or a top 6 guy at the lightweight division, but if you watch essentially all of his performances and especially his most recent performance versus Justin Gaethje, there's just not really too much to the game of Paddy Pimblett. His striking is not very good, to say the least. He kind of gets away because he's physical. He has a really good chin, as we saw in his last fight versus Gaethje, and he hits somewhat hard. But outside of that, there's not really much to love about Paddy's striking. His wrestling is really bad as well. I believe he only has 2 takedowns in his entire UFC career. Not great for a primarily grappler sort of fighter. His jiu-jitsu is great. If he can get on top, yeah, he's very dangerous, but his striking is bad and his wrestling is bad. So it's difficult for him to actually get to the point where he wants to in a lot of these fights, especially when he's going up against elite level talent. So the question is, does that fight make sense? And I think honestly the answer is yes. If Conor is able to beat Paddy Pimblett, it's a big money fight. It provides a lot of money for the UFC. And if he does win that fight, it does definitely open the door to Conor fighting again, maybe fighting for the belt after that or something like that. We'll see. And if Paddy Pimblett wins, all of a sudden he builds his name and his stardom off of Conor McGregor, which would definitely rocket ship his name through the roof, obviously. But the third option that I think the UFC can go with is Jorge Masvidal. Now, I know Jorge has been talking about this for a while, but essentially he has been saying that he does want to return to the UFC, and he's actually been in negotiation with the UFC. Now, I know Dana White said that they're not actually in negotiation with Masvidal. It's kind of difficult to get a true read on what's going on there, but at the end of the day, I do think a fight between Conor and Jorge makes a lot of sense. This was definitely a fight that a lot of fans wanted to see in the past when both these guys were in their primes, more or less. And this could be an opportunity to finally put that fight together. I get it. Jorge Masvidal has been retired for a while. I get it. Conor McGregor hasn't fought in 5+ years. But at the same time, they're both really big names. And I do think it's a very winnable fight, honestly, for either one of these guys, but especially for Conor. And as I said before, if you're going to bring Conor back, you probably want to bring him back in a fight where he can actually win. It's not a guarantee he's going to win, but at least give him a shot to win a particular fight. So, in my opinion, I think that fight does make a lot of sense. And out of those 3 options, I probably would go with the Jorge Masvidal fight if I was in charge. Maybe the second option would be Paddy Pimblett, and then the third would be Michael Chandler. But we'll see. Obviously, it depends what the UFC wants to do. Even as I said before, there's not even a guarantee that Conor McGregor is actually even going to return. So everything's kind of just a wait and see at this point. I'm excited to hear an official announcement relatively soon, hopefully. But at this point, we just don't really know. So we'll see. But the next topic that I wanted to touch upon is, will Ilia versus Islam ever happen? Now, this is a question that I get a ton in my live streams, as well as honestly in the comment sections of a lot of videos. But fans obviously want to see this fight, and so do I. This is obviously the biggest fight you can put together in the sport. The question is, are we ever going to see it? In my opinion, the answer is yes, most likely yes. I'll put it that way. I think there's probably a 70 to 75% chance we see this fight eventually happen. Now, I will say this. I do think it's pretty clear that Islam is ducking the fight against Ilia in some sort of a way. There was 2 opportunities that Islam had to fight Ilia, and he more or less ducked. I mean, I think he ducked, but maybe some people will say he didn't. But he more or less ducked Ilia Topuria 2 separate times. The first time is when Ilia initially made his move up to 155. Islam was still at the weight class at that point, and he had the opportunity to just stay at the weight class and fight Ilia, but he didn't want to. He wanted to move up to 170, which, okay, maybe you can say that's understandable. He wanted to go for that second belt. A lot of other champions went for their second belt already. Islam actually defended his belt against Volkanovski, who was going for his second belt twice. So, okay, I guess I kind of get it from that perspective. But the second opportunity that Islam had to fight Ilia was at this White House card. There's been a lot of chatter about this fight potentially happening, and it came out that the fight was going to happen, or at the very least was in negotiation to happen. And it was on the side of Islam, the reason for why it didn't happen at least. Ilia wanted to fight, Islam did not. More or less, that's the reality of the situation. I know the story is a little bit more complicated and a little bit longer than that, but at least how I interpret it is Ilia wanted to fight, Islam didn't. Or maybe Ilia's team wanted to fight, Islam's team didn't. Maybe it's not even on Islam, maybe it's on Ali. I honestly have no idea. But for one reason or the other, the fight didn't happen. So because of those 2 essentially fight denials, a lot of fans are thinking this fight is never going to happen. But the reason for why I think it will, or at the very least most likely will is I think there's a very clear path, and I don't think Islam can duck Ilia for a third time. And the clear path is this: if Islam Makhachev wins his next fight and Ilia Topuria wins his next fight against Justin Gaethje, which, let's be honest, is going to happen, at that point, I think there's a very realistic possibility we finally see that fight. As at that point, Ilia Topuria is almost definitely going to move up to 170 pounds. And also at that point, Islam Makhachev doesn't really have the ability to move up again to essentially avoid Ilia Topuria. So at that point, I think there's actually a good chance we finally see that fight. Now, if Ilia loses to Gaethje somehow, or if Islam loses to, let's say, Michael Morales or Ian Gary, whoever he fights next, then okay, we're probably never going to see the fight, unfortunately. But if they both win their next fight, which I think Ilia definitely will, we'll see who Islam is fighting. I think there's a great chance we finally see that fight. Now, I know it will be at 170. I know a lot of fans say they don't really care about that fight at 170 just because Islam's going to be so much bigger than Ilia. It's not really going to be even fair, and you would obviously have to favor Islam at that point. And to that, honestly, I would agree. I do think you have to favor Islam at 170 pounds. The weight difference and the size difference is going to be so severe that it's just difficult to see Ilia overcoming that. But even with all that being said, I still want to see the fight. Ilia has done great things throughout his UFC career thus far. He wasn't even that big for 145, became the champion. Clearly not big for 155, became the champion. So, I don't want to fully doubt this guy. But with all that being said, I still think you have to favor Islam at 170. But we'll see. As I said, I want to see the fight. I think we will see the fight around a 70 to a 75% chance, but only time will tell. And obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it than just winning fights, I guess. Obviously, contract negotiations need to go well on both sides. I think both sides, honestly, have proven that if they don't get the right money, they're not going to, fight in this huge money fight. Ilia did decline the fight initially against Islam, not because of Islam, but because of the money. Now, eventually, he did accept the fight because the money was right. But I guess really what I'm trying to say by saying that is the money needs to be right. But from the UFC's perspective, I'm sure they really want to get this fight done. So they're probably going to do whatever it takes to get both sides to agree to this fight and finally put together that super fight. And that's also going to kind of check off a box of something that we've been talking about a lot on live streams and podcast episodes as well, which is the UFC desperately needs stars and rivalries. And if you put together a fight between Islam and Ilia, it kind of accomplishes both things. Now, Islam and Ilia are both stars within their own right. But if Ilia is able to beat Islam, all of a sudden his star power goes through the roof, and vice versa. If Islam is able to beat Ilia, his star power goes through the roof. So it's a big fight for their stardom. And also on top of that, it's a rivalry. I think everybody kind of acknowledges that, and it kind of checks that box off as well. It would be a huge money fight for everybody involved. It just makes too much sense for that fight to not happen. So I'm definitely staying optimistic that we eventually see it. I think we're 2 fights away, a win from each guy away from getting that fight. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening. But yeah, fellas, that's what I got for you in this podcast episode 6 of the Juicecast. Obviously, there is a lot to talk about. I'm still kind of working behind the scenes at getting some additional MMA YouTubers or maybe some of my friends even to hop on some of these podcast episodes so we can mix it up a little bit. But I appreciate you boys for joining the podcast. Let me know any questions or comments you have down below about anything that I said in this podcast episode. I definitely will be responding to your comments. Also, I will probably be doing a instant reaction to the main event, Aljamain Sterling versus Youssef Zalal, essentially give my input on that fight. So stay tuned for that Saturday night. But until the next time, brothers, peace out.